Okay. Hello to any and all who are either joining us live or will be watching this later on the YouTubes, as they say. I'm your host, Greg Drobny. Welcome to Code Platoon's virtual info session, the first of 2025. Joining me, as always, is Kayla, and doing all the hard things while I make it look easy. Welcome. Again, this is our first info session of the year. Basically, these are casual info sessions where we present some basic information about Code Platoon and then open it up for questions and answers. So, Kayla, did we want to start with some of the most commonly asked questions first? And that way we can just kind of describe a little bit about Code Platoon, or how do we want to do this?
Yeah, let's start there. And I think a great place to start would be what is the current situation with vet tech in 2025?
Great, super complicated question to ask right off the bat. This is an ever-changing thing for any and all who are paying attention to the veteran space. So for those unaware, Vet Tech was a funding initiative started by the VA about 6 years ago, and it was a pilot program designed to help people fund coding boot camps like ours or similar types of schools that did not necessarily fall under the same rules as the GI Bill. The GI Bill had some shortcomings when it came to technical training that was not like a regionally accredited university. So this program, Vet Tech, was started to basically address some of those shortcomings and enable veterans to attend programs using VA money. However, as I said, it was a pilot program, and that pilot came to an end. They ran out of funds. This was recently resurrected with a put a star and a little caveat there that we'll return to. It was recently resurrected under the Elizabeth Dole Act. That was just signed by President Biden. I believe it was last week. So this is brand new law. Now, there are a couple of things to note right off the bat. Is that number one, the Elizabeth Dole Act was overall, it was a healthcare bill dealing with veterans' healthcare. This was tucked into it, and it was dealing with this vet tech issue. But first to note is that it doesn't refer to it as vet tech. We have yet to see any official documentation stating that it is called vet tech anymore. As far as I know, it is not being referred to as vet tech anymore, which means there are some changes, which brings us to point number two. What are the changes? Well, that's a little bit tricky to answer right now, simply because the VA has yet to fully implement it. And as anyone knows, when it comes to implementation, that's where things start to change a little bit. There are a couple of changes with regards to how it worked before and how it works now. It used to be completely separate from the GI Bill. Basically, all you had to be eligible for the GI Bill, but you could have all of your GI Bill or have one day of your GI Bill, and it didn't matter. One of the big changes with the new version of vet tech is that you have to use up your GI Bill first, which means you wouldn't be able to tap into these funds until your GI Bill is done. But that's not a bad thing for most veterans, because basically it just means you're going to end up using the same funds just in a different order. You're just going to need to use the GI Bill first. And then you have this bonus of having these extra funds available for a tech school like Code Platoon. So it ends up working very, very well. I think right now, from everything I understand, it works very well for the veterans who want to access more education, because that's what it's giving you. It's giving you more. It's just slightly different than the previous version. As long as you're tracking on that right now, Code Platoon is going to be at the forefront of figuring this out and how to maximize that for every individual veteran. And we're going to have as many options on the table as possible because of who we are and what we do. So that's I know that was a long answer. I talked a lot and probably made it maybe even a little more complicated than it should be, but I like to, at least get the basics out there so people know knowing that things are in flux. Don't take any of this for granted at this point.
Absolutely. Since the vet tech reauthorization is so recent, if you're watching this in the future on YouTube, definitely reach out to Greg for a status update or to
Yes.
talk through your particular situation. That's Greg at codeplatoon.org.
Yes, thank you for that. Because Kayla's absolutely right. By the time our summer cohort rolls around, I'm guessing that the details on this will be hammered out fairly well, and we'll have a lot better handle on it. But it has to be done for us to fully understand how it works.
Yeah, awesome. Another question we get a lot is who does Code Platoon accept? Does that include military spouses and children of military veterans and service members?
Yes, it does. So Code Platoon operates solely for the military community, and that needs to be understood up front. We are focused on the military community only, but that includes military members who are transitioning out of the military, so skill bridge students, CSP for you Army folks out there, veterans. So if you're separated, it doesn't matter if you were separated a year ago, 10 years ago, whatever, you are eligible to attend Code Platoon. Spouses of either of those demographics, active duty or veterans. And now recently we are accepting adult children of military veterans. So yes, children. And so basically military families is the shorthand version of who we serve.
Awesome. Thank you, Greg. Perhaps the most important and most asked question of all that we get. What does Code Platoon teach and how will it help these folks get jobs?
Great question. And that's really kind of the fundamentals of what we're here for. So Code Platoon is in the business of training people to launch their career in tech, for a shorthand way of saying that. We're giving students the skills they need to become a junior software engineer, junior software developer. Those are the most common job titles that our students obtain. Now, I need to caveat that real quickly to say that they are not the only jobs that our graduates obtain, but they are the most common. So we have seen people go into data science, into cybersecurity, into various different realms that are adjacent to. But the primary goal here is to train people to be software engineers via immersing them in code writing, reading code, understanding code, manipulating code to build websites, build apps. One of the best resources we have for this is right here on YouTube. We have our graduation videos in which our students debut their final projects. That gives you a really good idea of what you work towards in order to be a software engineer, what your end goal is. If you're starting at zero, if you want to see where you end up by the time you graduate Code Platoon, watch our graduation videos, and it's a great way of seeing that. Now, the way we do that is through two different methods. We have the same program offered two different ways for full stack software engineering, which is immersive. So an all day, everyday program. So 5 days a week, at least 10 to 12 hours a day. It's intense for 15 weeks. Again, that's our immersive flagship program. And then we have a 28-week program. We recognize that some people just can't give up their day jobs to be able to do this. So we have a 28-week evening and weekend program that operates Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursday evenings from 5 to 9 p.m. Am I getting these times right, Kayla?
Yeah.
Central time. Every time that I mentioned is going to be Central time. It's on Chicago time. And then 8 hours on Saturday. So 3 evenings a week and an 8 hour day on Saturdays for the evening and weekend program for 28 weeks. Both of these, and this is really important, they are not, we notice that we don't call them full-time and part-time. There's a reason for that, and it has to do with the VA. The VA recognizes our 28-week program, an evening and weekend program. They do recognize that as full-time because of the hours involved. That's really important when it comes to VA benefits. So there's a specific reason why we do it that way. But that's how our main flagship program works. In addition to that, we also have the DevOps and Cloud Engineering program. That's an evening and weekend program only, primarily because of who it mostly applies to and appeals to, which are people who have some experience in tech. It's not to say you couldn't go through it if you don't have any experience, but DevOps is an interesting world, and a lot of people who work in software engineering already want to go into DevOps, and we have that program there to upskill and also to launch into the world of cloud engineering more thoroughly. So that's kind of the basics. I don't know if I need to elaborate on any of that here. Kayla, what do you think?
I think that's good. And if anyone has any follow-up questions, feel free to ask those in a second. Don't want to bog
Absolutely.
anyone down in the nitty-gritty details. Or check out our website. We have all the
Yes,
program information there as well.
absolutely.
Awesome. So we've talked about the different programs available and vet tech, which is always on everyone's minds. I would say the third most commonly asked question we get is, how do I apply to Code Platoon? And specifically the two different options. What are the differences and how does that work?
Yeah, great question. The simple starting point to answer that question is to go to codeplatoon.org. And on every page on our website, there's a little button at the top that says apply now. That's the simplest answer to that question. But once you do that, once you click on the apply now, as Kayla mentioned, you're going to see two different options. You're going to see a guided application, and then you're going to see our standard application. Is that what we're calling it now, Kayla? Is it guided and
Standard and guided. Yes,
standard?
that's
Okay.
right.
I wanted to make sure I got the verbiage right because we have changed these things. So guided and standard, and the guided is exactly how it sounds. Now, what that means is that you are submitting an application, the first part of our application, but you're selecting the guided application, which is a series of classes. It's a class takes place over about 3 to 3.5 weeks that will help you learn what you need to know in order to get through the application, because we do need you to start learning some coding. We need to start learning some Python to apply to the program. We want people to have some basic understanding, first of what they're getting into, but also to have some basic understanding of how to write code so that we can maximize their time at Code Platoon. We're not starting at zero on day one of Code Platoon. By that point, you will already have some fundamental understanding. This has always been the case. It's always been the case that people needed to know these things to get through the application process, which is what the standard application is. You want to learn some of this on your own. We're going to give you the resources necessary for that. We're going to send you courses on Python. And in fact, that guided application class I just mentioned, it's on YouTube. We're going to send you the whole playlist to that. The guided application, the difference there is that you're signing up for a cohort, kind of a class that you're going to take part in with other people, led by a Code Platoon instructor who's going to help you learn the fundamentals in order to get into the program. So those are the basic ways that you get into the program. Both are going to require essentially the same thing. It's going to require completing both part 1 and part 2 of our application. But how you get there is a little bit different. You're going to have a little more instructor help on part 2. But again, it's the same thing. You're still learning the same thing. When we're this far out from a guided application class, I think that our next class starts in April.
April, yes.
So our next guided application class starts in April. We're sitting here in January, and if somebody wanted to apply right now, I would tell them, sign up for the guided application. There's no downside in doing so, and start working on this stuff on your own between now and then, because maybe you learn enough to do the application on your own. Great. You can still go to the guided application, or maybe you're not quite ready by the time the guided application rolls around, in which case, also great, you can go to the guided application class. So there is no downside in signing up for the guided application. It's free. It costs you nothing other than your time. It's not something that, if you don't make it to all the classes, we're going to look down on you or something like that. It is there for you. It is a study aid to help you get into the cohort. So that's kind of the basic outline of how that works.
Absolutely. And feel free to ask any follow-up questions if you have them. The last commonly asked question that I'll pose before we open the floor to audience questions. This actually came in before our session started. I heard the GI Bill can be used remotely at Code Platoon now. Is that true? And how does that work?
Short answer is yes. This is also a recent change. And so when we're talking about changes at the VA, a lot of these changes are brand new. So yes, the VA, there's a recent change that happened that enabled the GI Bill to be used for our remote students. It didn't used to be the case. It used to be that you would have to come in person to use the GI Bill. They would not fund our program remotely, which, going back to the original question, that's why Vet Tech was started in the first place, to be able to enable people to attend these programs where the GI Bill had a shortcoming. So the GI Bill just changed, and they now do allow the GI Bill to be used at a program like ours if you're attending remotely. But, and this is a key difference, it operates differently than the post 9/11 GI Bill currently does. Post 9/11 GI Bill currently pays a school and gives a student a living stipend. That changed from the Montgomery GI Bill to the post 9/11. This new change with the GI Bill and a school like ours, if you were to attend remotely, They are going to pay you, the student, and then you are going to reimburse the school. It's a bit back to the old fashioned way, and it's kind of confusing. We help you navigate that process. Bottom line is that we're going to help you navigate that. And we also are going to be offering scholarships for the living stipend portion of that. So you'll have to engage with me privately to figure out how all of that works, because it does get somewhat complex and this is a recent change. But short answer, yes, GI Bill does operate remotely and it just works a little bit different.
Perfect. And once again, to contact Greg for any like personalized advice to your situation, feel free to email him at greg@codeplatoon.org.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Any questions? I see your camera on, Patrick. Hey.
Hey, Kayla and Greg, thank you so much for putting this on. I guess I had two main questions, or I guess two and a half questions. The first one being, I think you answered it, but like seeing that it's January now, and I'm interested in potentially doing the in-person cohort either in the summertime or in the fall. And essentially what I've gathered just from the website and from hearing both of you is that I need to just finish the like any of the courses sent to me, be it Python or the guided YouTube sessions. And then I've been chipping away at the it's like the intro to Java sessions. And then by completing all of those, then I'll be able to complete part two of the application. Is just like, is that correct? Or
Yes.
am I missing anything?
No, you've got it absolutely correct.
Okay, sweet.
And I should add just really quick. Well, number one, it's good to see you in person. I know we
Yeah.
exchanged emails, but it's good to see you. Just to add really quick, I think this is really important to understand. In learning Python to get into the program, this isn't a hoop to jump through. This is being a software engineer. Like you're building the skills necessary to actually do the job. So the more you start learning now, the better off you'll be, because that's going to apply to everything you do.
Yeah, totally.
I also want to throw into that question about whether you have to finish the whole thing is we will let you retake the coding exercises in part two as many times as you want. So
Cool.
if you're feeling good, like you're welcome to right after this, like start them, see how you do. And then if you feel like you need some more practice, continue with those courses and try again later. We won't
Gotcha. Cool.
penalize you or anything.
Okay,
Good
sweet.
point.
That's super nice. And then I guess the follow-up, well, I've I know you guys touched on vet tech, which isn't a thing anymore, but now I didn't know VR&E was a program until I was just looking at resources. So it might be helpful for like future info sessions if you guys cover VR&E, just because I checked on it and it doesn't tap into GI Bill, like if you qualify
Yes.
for VR&E, or if it does, then it's like two separate buckets. Like it's still, because that was my biggest concern, was I didn't want to use my GI Bill for like a 3 to 4 month course when I could use it for like a PhD or master's down the road.
Yes.
Not to say your guys' program isn't like worth GI Bill, but like it's just like just the amount of time was like my biggest
Oh.
concern with it.
No,
Just
you're
about,
absolutely correct. Yeah.
yeah. But I guess with that, like I'm going through that process now, and I guess what do I just have to have approval or all of that finished before like the application date for whatever cohort that I'm doing? Or how does VR&E work with you guys?
Yeah, great question, and I'm glad you brought it up. Short answer is it works very well. So
Nice.
I'm glad that you brought it up, because that's something we usually do talk about. We just didn't cover it yet today, but I tell people all the time, I think VR&E is arguably the best method for going through Code Platoon if you have it.
Right.
Because it's fantastic. It, like you said, it doesn't tap into your GI Bill. They'll pay for the whole program. They'll give you a living stipend and they'll buy you a laptop. That is a win all the way around for everybody. And here's the cool thing, they'll keep paying after you're done. VR&E doesn't stop because you graduate Code Platoon. Like the GI Bill, like when you graduate a school, GI Bill, that's it, it's done, right? Well, when you go on past Code Platoon, they're still going to be with you as you get a job and start your career. So it's a great Now, that being said, back to your question, You don't have to have any of that worked out to apply or even be accepted. So our application and acceptance process is 100% independent of funding method.
Okay.
The application process happens the same regardless of what type of funding you're using or how it works. And you can be fully accepted without us even having that figured out yet. In fact, that's normally how it works. We've had people go completely accepted, they're completely ready to start, and we still are still working that funding piece. So you don't have to have any of that done prior to getting accepted, the VR&E stuff. In fact, a slight caveat here, you're already working on it, so this isn't really
Hmm.
applicable to you, but just kind of for your knowledge and for passing on. I just learned that VR&E works retroactively.
Ah,
So if we have a student who already graduated Code Platoon, they're working on getting VR&E to pay for it,
cool. Okay.
which is super cool, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's a really neat deal. But at any rate, you don't in any way have to have the VR&E stuff set in place to apply, get accepted, any of that. I'm happy to help and add thoughts for VR&E. On that note, have you already had a counselor meeting, already had a
I
counselor assigned, or?
I did the initial orientation yesterday, and then my uh just dealing with scheduling the first counselor session. So
Okay, good,
I'm
good.
I'm hoping it'll be like I'm sure there's more bureaucracy to cut through, but I think it's nearing the part where I'll know if I'm approved for it or not.
Yeah. So here's the big thing, and I'm glad you brought this up because we can talk about this here and then this can be out on the internet. We've already talked about it in the past with other people, but a really important thing to understand before you go into that first counselor meeting is number
Hmm.
one, do your homework.
Okay.
Hopefully, you've already done some research. Look up on YouTube questions like how to make sure I get VR&E, right?
Mm.
There are actual lawyers on YouTube who give presentations on this subject because, and this is why I bring this up, VR&E does not work like the GI Bill.
Right.
It's not the same. And if you go in there with the mentality that it is the same, they'll kick you out.
Mm.
And I'm not kidding when I say this. They will, if you walk in there and say, hey, I want you to pay for school, like they'll give you a big thumbs down and be like, that's no interest. This is really important because the way VR&E works is that it is designed around the premise of retraining the individual based on their disability, right? So I don't ever ask people what their injuries or anything like that is. Instead, I use myself as an example. I was an airborne infantryman. I broke my hip and I've got a C-spine injury. If it were me going into VR&E, what I do is I say, hey, I can't do things like that involve like a lot of car driving or a lot of heavy lifting or a lot of walking because I've got these injuries. So I need something that is more conducive to my injuries. How about software engineering? And then have that kind of plotted out along those lines as your premise rather than, hey, I really want to use VR&E benefits. You see what I'm saying? Like gear it around whatever your
Yeah, yeah,
situation
totally.
is and align it with that, and they will be much more conducive to helping. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah, no, that's great advice. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Um, and then I don't want to keep you guys too much longer, but
Well, that's
the
okay.
last question I had, and it's a big determining factor on which cohort I pursue, or even if I go to Code Platoon. But
Mhm.
um, I'm really keen on going to the summer session, as that's the June to September, as
Yeah.
that's the nearest one. However, I have a lot of plans during that summertime, and I don't. It seems like it's like a full all-in effort kind of thing, and that co-platoon doesn't seem very flexible in terms of like taking a Thursday, Friday, Monday off or something like that. Um, I obviously want to make this big change in my life, but I mean, everyone that's been in the military has missed a lot of big events in their life, and it's something I'm not really willing to compromise on.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
and if it meant I had to push to a following cohort, I would do that. But in my case, like I don't want to put my life on hold for another 4 months, so I'd probably just try to learn everything on my own and um, like just become a developer like without a code platoon.
Sure.
But it's the only program I've seen that's one like veteran driven, but two um, seems less of like a farm situation. Like I've seen tons of coding boot camps that are like offered at University of Washington or offered at this, but it's really just they're offering the facility and it's like a third party that's just kind of like churn and trying to
Yeah.
make money.
Yep.
Whereas you guys at least seem very holistic. And I like, well, I would love to like, I would love to be in Chicago for 3 months and like get all that interaction, but
Mhm.
it's like a timing thing. And I don't know, I'm just trying to balance those things or see if it's
Sure.
even like discussion worthy.
Sure. So right off the bat, I mean, I think it's important to note that we are realistic. And yes, it's all in, but we do have a realistic number of days that you can miss. Consider the population we are serving. We're serving the veteran community. What do veterans have a lot? VA appointments that can't be changed, right? We recognize that. So people missing a day, like you said, like a Friday to go to a VA appointment. Okay, like that's not a big deal at all. Missing days here and there. Now, how much time can you miss? A lot of this is there's a couple levels to this question. Level number one is, can you miss the time and still keep up with the work?
Mm,
Right? It's on the individual level
right.
because of what you're doing. It's not just a detail of, we need you to be here X number of days. It's, can you keep up with everything that's required and make sure that these things are done? That's
Okay.
a big piece of this, is as long as you are keeping up with the work, then missing a day here and there is not anywhere near as big of a deal as if you're struggling and you're falling behind. And then, oh, also I want to take this 5-day weekend.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah,
just like in the military, or just like any other job, like the person who's keeping up on everything and staying up on it is much more likely to have that time off than the person who's not.
yeah. Okay.
Now, that being said, Kayla, do you have it handy? Do we have an official number of days that can be missed? Do you? I don't remember what that is. And I don't want to tell you incorrect on that because it's kind of a technical thing. The
Yeah.
reason I say this part is technical is because of if you want to be in good standing with the VA, and we are a VA recognized school, right? They have requirements that have to be met. So when it comes to things like VR&E and meeting requirements for the VA, they are going to have a certain standard, just like they do for a college, right? If you miss certain number of days going to a university, the VA is going to go, ooh, no, that's a big no-no. So I want to make sure that I give you the correct information on that if I'm passing it. It might be that I have to email that to you and I don't cover it here, that's fine. We've been talking via email, so no big deal. But just be aware, yes, you can miss a certain number of days. I don't recall what like the exact number of allowed absences is at this time. I'll have to look that up. So,
Okay.
I
does that
Yeah,
shot
make
a
no,
sense?
quick message to the program director, and if he gets back to me in the next couple of minutes, I'll let you know. But if you have any other questions, feel free to proceed in the meantime.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, those were the big ones. And mine's like on the low end 3 days and on the max like 6 days. So I figure, I mean
I
that
think that's,
that is like really reassuring news just because
yeah.
like it's not until April is the apply date and like I'm doing this like 6 hours a day. So I'm hoping like even if I do miss some days, it's like maybe I already will have covered some of that stuff or maybe I'll have learned it. So
Sure. No,
um
I think what you're talking about is 3 to 6 days is doable.
yeah,
And the reason I say that is because, again, if we're serving the veteran population, we also have a lot of reservists and guard members who attend, right? And they have to do a drill,
yeah,
so, and a lot of drill weekends are Friday through Sunday night. So we have to be accommodating to people in that way, because yeah, it's inevitable we're going to have guard and reservist students who have to miss,
hmm,
a Friday and a Monday for a long. I can't remember what we used to call them in the guard. I don't know. I was in the Utah National Guard, so they have weird terms for
yeah.
everything. I mean, but you know what I mean? Like those certain number of drills that you have to do that are long weekends, we have to be accommodating for that. We have to be realistic for it. So I think what you're talking about is probably realistic. What I recommend at this point, until I get a specific answer to you, keep going with the application process as if you're going to apply to that summer cohort.
Hmm.
If you get accepted to that summer cohort, there's still nothing binding you, right?
Right,
There's
right.
nothing that's like you're locked in and committed with funds and all that kind of stuff. But at that point, once you've been accepted, you're then welcomed into the community itself. You could start having conversations with the instructors way ahead of time and say, hey, what do you think about, me missing this number of days and these specific days? What does that look like? And if they come back with answers that are just not kind of working for you, okay, then we punt to the next cohort.
Right.
We've done that numerous times with numerous students, right? Like, I was accepted to, what is that in June? Is that Avenger? No, that's not Avenger. That's is that Avenger?
Yeah, I
That's
think
Avenger,
Avenger.
yeah.
Yeah.
We renamed all the names, right? Because we exhausted the alphabet. If you get to Avenger and you're like, hey, I just can't do it, I want to punt to Buffalo. Okay, we do that. No big deal. That happens all the time.
Cool. Okay. Well, yeah, thank you. I really appreciate all the feedback, especially the like prep for the VR&E counselor meeting. Not that like that's my exact or was my plan or anything, but it's just
Right.
just you just don't want to be caught off guard when it's
Absolutely.
when it's something like with so much like consequences. So
Yes.
I really appreciate that.
There's a lot riding on it. So like I said, my recommendation is don't take my word for it, is go on YouTube really quick and just type in like how to maximize VR&E. There's one video I watched before I did it, of a woman who's a former VR&E counselor.
Oh,
and
nice.
she does like a 30-minute, and it's one of the highest rated, videos. It's like 40,000 views. And it's her basically saying all of this, saying like, here's how you make sure that you get it. So definitely do your homework, because like you said, there is a lot riding on it. It's a great program that so few veterans know about, because the VA does a terrible job of telling anybody about it.
Totally.
They're also short on counselors. So that's the longest part of the process, is getting a counselor. Once you get a counselor, you're off to the races. It works really well.
Right on. Well, it was great to meet you guys, and yeah, thank you so much for
Thank you.
everything you guys do. And yeah, I'll keep in contact with any future questions, but I think I just got to nug through all the classes. So thank you so much.
Beautiful. Well, thanks,
Awesome.
Patrick. And yeah, don't hesitate to email me when you've got some more questions.
Awesome. Okay. Take care, y'all.
All right.
Thanks, Patrick.